This is Ben Franklin, welcoming you to the Forecast, where we light a candle rather than curse the darkness. Each week, we highlight the people proving that progress isn't just possible, but necessary. As Poor Richard said, energy and persistence conquer all things. Now, let's get to work.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Forecast. Keegan here, and it's July 4th, and I'm celebrating with a very special episode. We're living in a world that feels off-kilter, wars that threaten to expand quickly and swiftly, protests in our cities, and a growing sense that the old ways of doing things just aren't working anymore. And yet people keep showing up, they keep building, and we all keep believing. So I started thinking, what kind of wisdom cuts through all this noise? What kind of advice actually holds up, not just on the battlefield or in the boardrooms, but at the dinner table, in our communities, in our everyday lives? That's where today's guest comes in. Daniel Cosgrove is a retired Marine Corps lieutenant colonel, a lawyer, and a longtime public servant. He's advised presidents and built housing for veterans. He's helped write the rules, and more importantly, he's lived by a code. He's also a father and a grandfather, and someone who spent decades navigating the tensions between ideals and institutions. Today, we're going to talk about war, peace, immigration, misinformation, possibly drones, what it means to serve, and what kind of country he hopes his grandchildren inherit. That's the thing that I think is most important. If you're looking for something grounded, something generous, and something that just might make you feel and breathe a little bit deeper, this one's for you all. Welcome to the Forecast, Dan.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
So there's a lot going on, obviously. I'm curious to start, with my initial question. What parallels do you see between today's immigration tensions and past moments of internal division in American history?
I've had a sign in my office for decades, and it says, "No Irish need apply."
I know that sign, yeah.
Yes, and my grandfather faced that when he came in 1890 from Ireland. Now, I'm also related to somebody who came in 1630, and there were just trees here and
Wow.
a lot of other stuff, and they went up and cut the trees and did other things. So there's a great difference.
Yeah.
But it's the people from 1630 eventually didn't want the Irish to come in 1890. So there are plenty of parallels there. On the West Coast, we had Chinese. We needed them to build the railroads, but we really didn't want them to stay.
Yeah.
Then we didn't know what to do with them. And during World War II, some of the Japanese were interned. Not that they were dangerous. They were different. And what people don't understand about that is, hey, when they set up the 442 Regiment, which is the most highly decorated army unit at the time, they were all Japanese, and they fought in Italy. They fought in Europe. And they did great. They took a lot of casualties. They were fantastic. So the people that they're trying to get rid of, some of them are veterans. Some of them are people who are the fathers of veterans, the parents of veterans, the brothers and sisters of veterans, people who have died in combat, people who have been wounded, people who have really been there. Unlike some other people who say, oh, wait a minute, it's an all-volunteer force now, so we don't have to go.
Yeah.
And that's the division. That will always be there. And, we had segregation. We had the civil rights movement. We had the hippie movement. We had the drug culture for a while.
Yeah.
We always have divisions. We have the East Coast, West Coast division. We used to say, it was really funny. We used to say the guys who went through boot camp in San Diego were Hollywood Marines. The guys who went through Paris Island were real Marines.
Uh-huh. Which one did you go through?
That's not the case. They're Marines. That happens with the Army and everybody else. World War II and World War I brought them together.
Yeah.
And we've had an example of that recently. COVID brought everybody together. You couldn't say, well, hey, we're sitting here in New York, we're having problems, but the guys in LA are doing okay. That doesn't happen. Everybody had it, and it spread around the world, just like the Spanish flu, the pandemic of 1918 to 1920. We're all one world now. I can talk to you, even though I'm not with you, because we have video phones. I can make phone calls off my smartphone to Auckland, New Zealand to talk to friends. I can send packages overnight anywhere in the world, just about. And it's that kind of a world.
Yeah,
So
no,
we have divisions. Go
and
ahead.
the
Sorry.
millions that listen to this podcast, I might be exaggerating a little bit, can listen to all of us. We're recording this, July 3rd, going to release it July 4th. And it just amazes me. I can have conversations with people, fascinating backgrounds like yourself. I just want to like zoom in a little bit on something you said around a common enemy during World War I and World War II and COVID.
Right.
Like I feel as though, there's this great tension around like, who do we blame in this moment, right? Like America's very geared towards like we need to rally around a common scapegoat, and obviously people like Stephen Miller, who seems to hold a lot of power in the White House with the president, like he's immigrants are the problem, right? Like that's from their perspective, it seems almost they're like immigrants are the Nazis that we're fighting, right? And like they're trying to rally their side around that. You've worked, advising presidents before. You've worked in government for a long time.
Sure.
What would you say, like, if you were brought in as an advisor on like what is our common enemy that we need to unite together against right now?
Stupidity. People.
I like it.
People who sit down and don't understand that unless you're a Native American, you came from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And even the people who crossed the Bering Sea on the ice bridge were immigrants. Everybody's an immigrant. And yeah, there are problems with people who are immigrants, but it's not all of them. Just like you're not going to have all immigrants become scientists. And that's the problem. I live in Loudoun County, Virginia, and we had an incident with an emergency room patient here recently where the guy didn't want to be handled by a doctor from India.
Wow.
He wanted to be handled by a white doctor from America. Hey, the senior doctor came over and said, hey, look, you're going to wait. We'll get you what you want, but you're going to sit here in pain until we handle other people. And the guy had to sit there. He was upset, but he had to sit there. Hey, you don't always get what you want. We have these wonderful people from all over the world, and they do great things. Albert Einstein wasn't born in Chicago. He was born overseas, and he came here. We had people who have become movie stars, people who have become generals, people who have become just about everything except president because you have to be born here. But these people contribute to the world. So let's do this. Let's focus on the ones that can actually contribute. And there are a few of them who will create problems. And when my father was a police lieutenant and he was going to law school when I was a kid, and one day, smart as I was at about 6 or 7, I said, Dad, why don't you just go out and arrest all the bad guys? And you can stay home here with us. And he said, no, it's not quite that easy. There are people who are professional criminals, people who have a bent towards committing crimes. And they're doing time for committing a crime, they're planning a crime,
Yeah.
or they're executing a crime. And I've taken that in my life. I've seen a lot of kids turn into criminals. But they were criminal. They were bending the law. And my dad also said some people commit crimes one time and it's a problem. Other people are professional criminals. And when I was practicing law, I met a bunch of those where you you can't change the spots on a leopard, or you can't change the stripes in a zebra.
Right. So do you inherently believe most people are good?
I believe most people are good. Most people are go out here and drive around.
Yeah.
Most people follow the traffic laws. And
Maybe,
in my
maybe they go
neighborhood,
5 miles over the speed limit every now and
yeah,
then.
you go 5 miles. Hey, you're not a criminal. They don't have to pick you up. But if you're out here doing 100 miles an hour on the parkway, you got a you got a problem. And the police are there to keep everybody basically within bounds. And a lot of people just want to go out of bounds. Some people want to go out of bounds. So the bounds are, do I want to go 5 miles an hour over? Or do I want to take my Porsche turbo, whatever, and do 105 miles an hour in an area where I shouldn't? And every day, the courts try to get that straight.
Man.
They talk to people, they find them. Police are out there. Police are out, they're the cutting edge. They're right there. They're looking across the fence at people who have committed crimes, have done bad things. And the police are trying to bring these people back inside their lanes. And there's a son of a police officer, a brother of a police officer, and a lot of other things. My cousins, several of them are police officers. But they're trying to keep the society together.
Yeah.
If there were no speed limits, it'd be really interesting around my neighborhood. People would be driving like crazy.
Well, I want to get back to the military and
Okay.
some other questions, but I can't resist just double clicking a little bit, given your family heritage and the conversation around immigration and scapegoating and all of this just begs to ask, like, what about people who grow up here who are fearful of the police? Like, obviously this isn't the main focus right now, but the previous Trump administration, Black Lives Matter became a very contentious issue. And I personally did not grow up. I consider myself privileged to be afraid of police. I grew up feeling like they were there to protect me. Right. I've talked to plenty of people, lots of friends, colleagues I've worked with. They're like, I grew up in constant fear of the police. It's a very different perspective. And I'm curious what you'd say to them, especially given, like, not so long ago, to your point, it was like the Irish that were the enemy. And part of what happened was, I'm oversimplifying a little bit, as a lot of them became police, right? Like they were driven towards that because they were scapegoated and then they became in charge in some places. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, what you had was people came here and they lived in poverty or just lived in squalor. And the police were there to try to stop them from doing certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Because the people on the other side of the street had more money and more status. And they were trying to keep them apart.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the good people.
This is why Georgetown doesn't have a metro stop, by the way.
That's right. That's exactly it.
Yes.
And people get up and they say, I don't want it in my backyard. I don't want it doing this. And they push the police out and say, hey, don't let them come across that line. And it's not the cops. It's the people who are saying, we don't want to address this today. We just want you to calm things down and keep us protected. We don't want to mix with them. And that's a big problem. And sometimes it's racial, sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's just, they got here and don't know what to do, and they're trying to work their way up. But hey, in a generation or two, if we stop all this craziness, we could pretty much meld most of the people in the country. We'd still have a prison system. We'd still have the police. We'd still have the courts. We'd still have all that stuff.
Mhm.
But they get together.
Yeah.
If you want to see it, join the military. The military is not colorblind, but it's working on it. Well, it was working on it until the election recently. And it's really something to watch people who are drill instructors. I've seen this a bunch. Drill instructors treat everybody in the platoon the same because they know that they're going off into units that are going to be mixed. And they're all going to have to work together or they're going to die. So the same thing with pilots. If you look at a pilot getting into a plane, that pilot doesn't care the race, the gender, the place of birth of the guy who fixed the engine. He just cares about it getting up in the air and getting him back. And that's a big deal. The same thing with an infantry unit. You don't really care about the guy's political background or what he wants for this. And I've seen a bunch of people who had very strong feelings. But when they're in training or they're in combat or they're going through their daily life in the military, you can't do that. We have for decades we've had to get rid of guys who were absolutely insane. I mean, they would just be racist or homophobic, and they'd be all kinds of. But hey, we can live. It's like today. It used to be the military had a very high number of people who were combat arms, infantry, artillery. They were going into combat. And now that's dropped significantly. We have a very high number of people who are into cybersecurity, people who are into analysis,
Yeah.
people who are into satellite analysis, right? All in communications. It's not 1939 anymore, and it's
I
not
wish it
going
was.
to be. I mean, look at the people who fix all of these satellites. Look at the people who run the drone programs. You can run a drone from the West Coast if it's in Afghanistan. You
Yeah.
can run a drone in not Iran, in I guess Saudi Arabia, wherever. I'll go through that in a second.
Yeah.
Communications are worldwide. Satellites are up there. A whole bunch of people have to get together to launch satellites. We've got a covering over the earth of
Mhm.
satellites.
Mhm.
And there are people who work in the military who are very good engineers and good scientists. They try to make sure that they don't run into each other and that they constantly give the information that you need.
Yeah.
Because you can communicate all over the world. And that's something really important.
Dan, are you a Star Trek fan? I don't know this actually. Are you a Star Trek fan, or were you a Star Trek?
Oh, yeah, I was.
Okay. A lot of my friends have heard me say this a lot. You know, the rise of AI and like the world changing, and everybody's like, AI is going to kill us or make us their pets. And I'm always like, they might. Also, we could live in the Star Trek future, where technology gets rid of scarcity. We have free energy, unlimited goods, and we just explore the galaxy and discover and create. And one of my friends, when I went on this rant the other day, was like, "Yeah, but in Star Trek, they're just showing you the military. That's the military that's having a great life. They don't really talk about what's happening to the non-military
Well,
on the planets." I'm like, well, maybe, yeah, because they're like, it works really well in the military. But it was a good point, and I do think about this a lot as you're talking through all of the complexities that has to happen, and it works so well in the military, from my perspective as a civilian, with not as much knowledge of you, but like you mentioned drones, like the stuff that they're doing is incredible, and it feels like non-military life we're way behind. And I'm curious if you have that same
Well,
perspective.
I wouldn't agree with that at all.
Okay.
There's a thing down in Texas called a Defense Innovation Unit for the military. And it's a place where the military can receive information about new projects, new capabilities that will help the military, but they're coming from the civilian side. They're people who are civilians who are walking in saying, I've invented this, or this works, or we have this as a company. And about 25 years ago, the CIA created a thing called InQtel. And did you know about InQtel?
I've heard the name.
Yeah, InQtel is the venture capital arm of the CIA.
Yeah.
Been very successful. People from civilian life come into InQtel and they pitch like they would to a private equity company. Well, the agency gets to see, for a very small amount of money, the agency gets to see new technologies. But they're coming from the civilian side. And the military has their own research units around the country. Go to Lincoln Labs. Lincoln Labs is part of MIT. They do really high-end research. But it's MIT. That's who it is. And, there's Draper Labs, there's a whole bunch of others. The civilian economy is supporting the military. And look at the people who are coming in now. We have a bunch of companies who are partnering with the military for all kinds of stuff. And the military does get things started. Internet, the Eisenhower interstate highway system, stuff like that. But the civilian world benefits from that. So we are woven together. We try to improve each other's lives and help. And, one thing you look at is in medical.
Yeah, who has better health care, military or civilians?
Well, it depends. If you go to one of the go to Walter Reed, it's huge.
Yeah.
If you go to Balboa in California, it's huge. If you go down into San Antonio, it's a whole city worth of military. There's no difference. I mean, some places are good, and if you're in Adak Island, Alaska, which I understand they're reopening, it's going to be a little sketchy. Other places, it's sketchy. But hey, I can tell you personal experience, you have a problem in Iraq during the battle, they'd do some good stuff to you, and they'd fly you to Germany, Landstuhl, and then they fly you back to the States to where if you have burns, you go to Texas. But the local people have the same stuff. Doctors for the military get trained in inner city hospitals to fix gunshot wounds, to try out different medications.
Yeah, sadly, we have no shortage of good experience to provide.
Right. And I've gone overseas on vacation, and I had to get shots. And I went over to the infectious disease clinic at Walter Reed, and they had a doctor there, very nice lady. She's a commander. And she said, oh, yeah, I just got back from 6 months in Ecuador, right in the area you're going to.
Wow.
And she had all of this stuff that, and she said, I got other people around, they're doing things. And the military needs that to protect their own troops if they're going into those general areas. And and the other thing is people don't know that some of the vaccines that are put out, like for malaria, are developed by the military and Bill Gates's foundation. And then they just give the patents to people who can, recreate it and sell it. But that saves lives.
Yeah.
And then they come up with things, civilian side, quick clot. Well, quick clot is a chemical that you put on wounds that are bleeding. Now, you can have gunshot wounds, blast wounds, or you could accidentally, if you're in a construction situation, you could cut yourself with a chainsaw. QuikClot doesn't know how you did it. All it knows is you're bleeding and you put this stuff on it and it helps coagulation. Fantastic. It's not military. It's not civilian. You might have gunshot wounds, guys out hunting and they accidentally shoot each other, but you could have just a guy with a chainsaw or a guy with an axe. So
Yeah.
that works. The other thing is medevac helicopters. They got pioneered by the military because they knew in the military, the doctors kept saying, if you can get in to a doctor within an hour of your injury, you stand a much better chance of survival, depending on what the injury is. Well, now we have helicopters that land on highways and car accidents. We have, and they're pioneering this stuff. And they're using night vision goggles that, started out for the military, but you can go into Dick's Hardware and buy them. So it's really, we're not two different worlds. And some people do think it's two different worlds, but we're not. Where do you get troops? You get them from the civilian community.
Of course. No, I know.
You know?
Well, I want to actually go back a little bit instead of
Okay.
zooming the future. We'll go back to the future in a little bit, but I'm curious, just given your background, you spent a lot of your early career preparing for Cold War threats.
Sure.
And the world is different on the international stage. Obviously, Russia's still someone that we're dealing with, maybe
Right.
a little bit different than the Cold War. But from your perspective, how do you view the asymmetrical conflicts that are happening today across the world versus like your work during the Cold War?
When I was growing up and I was in the service, we had one major enemy. It was Russia.
Yeah.
And as somebody put it, we had one big snake to deal with. And that snake kept everybody else in line. Now there was also China there, but they weren't as bad. But when the Soviet Union fell, we ended up with, as one person put it, a garden of snakes. So instead of one that we could deal with, to worry about, we had guys everywhere that went off on their own. Asymmetrical warfare is just that. It's anybody who wants to do anything. Do you want to do something on the internet? Do you want to carry a suitcase bomb? Do you want to use a small group to push military activities? That's been going on for thousands of years. Remember, the Trojan horse is asymmetric warfare. Why would you want to attack the walls traditionally with a bunch of spear-carrying guys if you could just ride the horse in? And that's the same thing that happens today. Everybody is doing things the most efficient way they can, and you don't want to see all your guys get killed because you do the dumb old thing. And so now you have people who are trying to bomb airplanes. They're having germ warfare. They're doing all kinds of other stuff. It's just the guy who doesn't have all the tanks and the ships and the missiles is going to try other ways. And the bigger and badder you are, the more open you are to that kind of an attack.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how commanders in the field, whether they be a revolutionary in some small country in Africa or South America, or a big country like China, they're going to try to sneak in the best way they can. And we've seen that. 9/11 was that way. They figured a way around the system. And I'm sure people thought about using airplanes as missiles, but it didn't occur to all the people who needed to get the information. And as it was said by a number of people afterwards, It was a lack of imagination. And that's not new. There was a lieutenant colonel in the Marines back during the First World War. He was a character. His name was Pete Ellis. There's a book about him written by, do you know about Pete?
Mhm.
Well, Pete had some issues. He's the only guy I know of that ever received the Navy Cross for planning. He would plan all the major battles during World War I for the Marines. They got out of that war. He still stayed in the Marine Corps, did planning, got the headquarters Marine Corps, and he left. He left a plan. He said that the Japanese, and this is late 1920s, he said the Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor by air. Now, back then, planes were made out of wood and dope fabric. Everybody thought he was crazy. And he had the imagination to say they're going to do that. He died in the Pacific, and they did it.
Yeah.
So there must have been people who believed that could happen on 9/11. They could fly planes into the tall buildings. The lack of imagination, I'm sure there was somebody out there who thought that, and that's why in a lot of places they look at published stories, scripts, things like that, because somebody with imagination is going to come up with a way of doing it. Same thing with, if you look back at Mumbai, when the attack on Mumbai came, those guys came into town on boats. They had seized boats, small boats, fishing boats, and they pulled up at the beach, jumped out, and they got cabs to their targets. And they were getting instructions by phone, cell phone, from commanders in another country who were watching the activities on CNN. Think about that. The commander doesn't even have to show up in the same country. Transportation is provided by the local commercial taxi company, unknowingly. And also, your surveillance and all your reconnaissance is provided by CNN or significant. That's a real difference. However, it's not the first time it's happened, and it'll happen again. That's why even the police now try to cut off television access because they don't want to give the perpetrators an advantage. Same thing happens in the military.
Give them oxygen.
Yeah.
It's bringing back memories for me of 9/11. I was, here in DC, and I was actually in Arlington. You could see like the smoke from the Pentagon, and like people, like everybody had to walk. All the bridges
Right.
were closed, and I just thought, I'm from New York originally, so watching all that in real time was pretty traumatic, as it was for a lot of people. And there was a really good friend of mine who I lived with then, and I called him that morning because I was working, but in college, and they were in college, and obviously it happened early in the morning, and for most college students, they weren't awake when it happened. So I just started calling people, like, turn on the TV,
Right.
especially friends from New York, seeing how they were. And this friend, known forever, who's best man at my wedding, like he and I, for the longest time, just like our anxiety driven minds were always like, what are terrorists going to try next? Like, why hasn't anybody tried like a mall shooting? Like we would come up with like crazy scenarios because we were just so, there was a period of time, remember, like when I laugh because it's uncomfortable. They'd have the colors, right? Like, what's the forecast for terrorists today? Right? Like they would have the different color alerts, and like our mail, we would like not open at our house for like months because there was anthrax coming through the mail. Just, I haven't thought about that in a long time. It makes me wonder now, like the thing that comes to mind is drones. Like that's like actually what scares me the most is there's all these amazing things being done with asymmetrical warfare with drones. And I feel like it could be easily used against us here too, for terror or other places. I'm curious your thoughts on that and what can be done to help
Well,
deter those kind of threats.
if you look at the imaginative things that are being done in Ukraine, they've just pulled off something very spectacular. They sent truckloads of drones into Russia. One of them went 1,500 miles, pulled up next to a bomber base, a strategic bomber base, opened a top, and the drones flew out, and they took video
Like a
of them
movie.
destroying Russian bombers hundreds of miles beyond the range of any drone at the time. We have high-level jet drones, but these are smaller attack drones. Hey, that particular program was thought about not for attack drones, but for Amazon package delivery a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in a drone conference. I got invited, and I was sitting there, and a guy came in, give his piece, and he was a retired Navy pilot. He was Top Gun qualified. And what he was pitching was a Amazon truck that would show up in a neighborhood, top it open, the sides are open. All the drones would fly out. They'd deliver 50 or 100 packages in the neighborhood. Then they would fly back to the truck, nest in the truck, and either pick up another package from the truck or be brought back to a warehouse. Well, that's the same plan that the Ukrainians used, except the distances were smaller and they were delivering packages. They were delivering aspirins and things. And the Ukrainians weren't delivering Christmas packages. They were delivering
Other pack.
destruction. And they videoed the whole thing, which is totally amazing. People are getting to the point now where they want to see the video of all of these things. Remember Norman Schwarzkopf and
Yes.
old Normie, Storm and Norman.
Norman.
Well, he had a briefing one time during the Iraq situation, and it's a reconnaissance aircraft flying over a bridge in Iraq, and a guy drives his truck across the bridge just as they're releasing the bombs. And Storm and Norman said, "This is the luckiest guy in Iraq in history." They had released the bombs, the guys on the bridge. They got a crosshair on it, and he's just driving out of the danger zone.
Yeah.
Just a second before the bombs hit. That's what we got now.
Yeah.
The Ukrainians went out. They videoed the whole thing. And now people want that. People want to sit in their houses and watch the military destroy targets somewhere else.
Well, and it's notable that the U.S. did not release video, at least unless I missed it, but did not release video of our missile strike on Iran.
No, that probably is sitting out in Whiteman Air Force Base. And the command is sitting there just going, "Oh, yeah, that really did work. We hit this, we hit that."
But they're not going to release it to the public.
They're not going to release it. Now, that's one of the problems we're going to have. People are going to say, "Well, maybe it worked. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it was a total obliteration. Maybe it was 20%. Maybe they'll put this thing back in 3 months." I don't know. The Israelis have bombed nuclear sites before. They've got a pretty good idea what happens, but I'd like to see the video too.
Sorry, a side comment.
Do that.
I'm curious. Tomorrow is America's 249th birthday. I've been thinking a lot about whether we're going to make it to our 250th birthday. I think we will. Maybe, I don't know. Just there's so much going on, and obviously, I'm an anxious person, if not clear from talking to you about all this. I wonder, from your perspective, are the threats to America greater from foreign or domestic right now?
Both. Yeah, we are coming up on 250. Now, what I really get from that is about 15 years ago, I went to a CIA luncheon, and the guy who sat across from me was older than me. He was about 80. So he had been a young officer during the initial part of the Cold War, and he served in Moscow. But he had retired and become a contractor. He said something very interesting. He said, in all our analysis of dictatorships and republics and all the rest of this stuff, we figured out republics last about 250 years.
Hmm.
And he said, we're coming up on that. And that, I've been reminded of that over and over and over again. Hey, wait a minute. We're almost there. Are we really breaking up? And we are. We've done this once before. We had a thing called a Civil War.
Yeah.
And 500,000 guys were killed. But there was somebody in charge who wanted to keep the Union together. He could have said, hey, you want to go, rather than us shooting each other, we'll just take this and you take that, and you get to do it. I don't know that's going to happen this time. I don't know that there's anybody there who says, no matter what happens, we're going to keep this together.
So California, Washington, Oregon secede. They make their own little country. I think Trump will be like, peace.
I don't know what he's going to do.
Yeah.
I wake up every morning saying, well, I'll turn the TV on to find out what he did today. I say to my wife, I didn't learn any of this in law school. I didn't learn any of this in the military. They're a different crowd, and it really is bad. I mean, people should know that. We don't have firm rules about anything anymore.
Yeah.
J6 was something. The pardons were something. All of this spending in the big, beautiful bill and all the rest of that stuff. I don't remember. That doesn't give me great confidence. And that's why I worry about my kids. But we have split the country into red and blue. And, I have relatives who are red and I have relatives that are blue. And I'm hoping that somewhere along the line, this can come together. Now, it's not the first time we've been here. We had the Civil War. We had all kinds of small rebellions. We had America Firsters before World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Charles Lindbergh was one of them. And then when we were attacked...
We had Nazis here too, rallying.
Yeah. See? So, we've come together to fight attacks on us. We tend not to look beyond our shores for things that are coming at us right now. And there certainly are people out there who don't like us and want to do us damage. And we seem to be chewing up the people in this country who want to stop that or who want to deal with it differently. And it's I don't know. I've said to a couple of people, it's performance art in politics now.
All performance.
It used to be that way in a very small manner, but now it's everything. Everything is performance art. We had a big parade here in town. I've been in parades. I've seen the military. And I know the guys hate those.
Well, a lot of them seemed to be quietly protesting, and they were not really marching in sync.
Hey, let me tell you something.
That's not the right term. I'm not military, so
I know, but you get out of step and you do all kinds of other things.
Yeah.
Hey, tanks aren't like what they showed. Okay? Tanks are big and noisy and dirty and, they're
destructive.
They had renovated these things, painted them beautifully,
Yeah.
hauled them up here from Texas on trains. There were Stryker vehicles. I've seen those things in the field. They scare me to death, especially if they move around at night. They're noisy. You can't always see them. Hey, it just bothers me. But people love them in parades. And That's the way it is. I'd rather have the money go to families in the military or troops in the military,
Yeah.
improving their living standards. But that's me.
I'm with you there. I sometimes get a lot of entertainment off of like conspiracy theories on the internet. Just having worked on the internet on the internet within the internet culture for so long, conspiracy theories are a big part of it. And the one was really the most fascinating one that was sort of growing because of the parade and also what was happening in LA with deploying very unnecessarily troops to LA
Right.
for very small protests. Trump was trying to trump up, pun
Right.
intended, but there was a group of folks online that I was reading this stuff and they were convinced that aliens were about to invade and that
I
the
hadn't heard that
parade and the troop deployment in LA was a quiet way of getting our troops to really critical areas without raising a panic because the aliens
one. Yeah.
that created us and the pyramids were coming back and we were getting ready for war and that Trump can't tell anybody but he's going to lead us to victory against this
Yeah. I keep hearing that he's going to do this. And
it's always
a little
Trump is
wait,
the hero, God hero, basically,
I
when
know it,
it's
but
conspiracy
there
theories.
were also things just before the election, conspiracy theories that John F. Kennedy is alive, and
Yes,
yes, and he's
that was
coming back,
wild.
and he and Trump are going to work.
Or
That's a little
JFK
much.
Jr., was alive too. Like there was, both of them.
Well, I don't know where you get those. I do remember working in the military, and they would get letters all the time, all the military unit, from people who thought they were in command. They wanted to tell us about conspiracies. It was all crazy stuff. However, there were people who really believed it, and they were very serious about it.
And now they can easily meet other people who believe it. I
Well,
would say generally being connected is a good thing. On that side, it's not so good. And so, where you said where I get it, social media, there's I like to monitor a lot of sort of it used to be called QAnon, right? Like
yeah,
people don't
yeah,
talk about it, but there's just there's certain groups and accounts that you can follow and you can see what sort of theories are becoming more pervasive because like a lot of it is psyops, right? Like people don't realize that it's a
yeah,
bunch of Russian military in a room somewhere in Moscow, typing. Why,
right.
yes, I also think Biden is the devil, like trying to purposely mess with people online to
Well,
create
that's
division.
one of the things that we now have propaganda 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
every day. And it can emanate from anywhere. It can emanate from some little village in the mountains in Europe. It could Ecuador, any place.
Yeah.
I'm not picking on Ecuador. I like Ecuador. But it could happen anywhere. And a person can strike out from a little village that nobody's ever been to, and they can strike a worldwide panic by saying things that are just crazy. And, you know, you got to be able to fight back. And we're not putting enough time and effort into being able to fight back to that kind of stuff.
All right, Dan, I need some hope here because it's we have a lot of things that are scaring me, frankly.
Well,
It's a really fascinating conversation, but I want to know, like, you
right,
tell your
okay.
kids, your grandkids, like, what can you hope for, right, in this new world that we're
Well,
quickly running
the only
to?
thing I can hope for is that they get good educations,
Yeah,
good health care, and they understand that they have to be loyal to the Constitution of the United States because that lives on. And we've had all kinds of problems over the years with people who tried to take over the country or tried to divide the country. And what they have to do is think, is this real? It's not. It's temporary. We
yeah,
need people to stand up. I knew John McCain. I met him a number of times. He stood up and said things.
yeah.
He said, this is crazy. And we don't get many people doing that. if you look at the vote on the big, beautiful bill, there are people caving in all over the place. Is it worth it to get what they're giving you? Is it 30 pieces of silver? And I want my kids to stand up and say, I'm here for the country. I'm not here to just make money or, push my own position. And I've worked for guys mostly guys, a couple of women, who have done that, stood up to power and said, hey, this isn't right. And they usually get hammered a little bit, but they're proven right in the long run.
Yeah.
And I want my kids to be on the right side of those things, not to just fade when the pressure gets big. And
do you think more are going to stand up as it becomes clear who's fighting for the Constitution and who's trying to wreck it?
I'm got to remember the last time we went through this, we had a civil war.
Yeah.
And it took some
but
real
Lincoln
courage.
wasn't trying to destroy the Union. I mean, I guess it depends on your perspective.
Lincoln was trying to keep everything together.
Yeah.
But that's what's happening now. It's always divide and conquer. We need to have people discuss things and to go through them and be able to teach their kids that they have to stand up and do things. We're going to go through a period with AI and the rest of this that their jobs will be lost. There'll be some tough times for some people, but there'll be, billions made by other people. We need to make sure that we're recruiting kids or recruiting people that can serve the country, serve what our country is made of, and look at the Constitution and say, okay, I'll go along with that. It's like the birthright citizenship bill.
Yeah.
Hey, at 150 years, we haven't questioned it. I never thought about questioning it.
It was inherently American.
Yeah.
We all just came here and became citizens.
Yeah. I mean, my grandfather became an American citizen, the Irish grandfather, but his sons were all American. They were born here, 4 of them.
Yeah.
And when World War II came up, his thing was, you're Americans. What are you going to do? And they went in the service. One of them couldn't medically, but he served his community. Hey, that's what we need. My dad wasn't happy about going. He didn't go singing into the Army, but he went. My uncles went in. They didn't go singing into the Army, but they went. And none of them, one of them went in the Navy, but hey, they were there.
You don't talk about them as much.
No. I mean, that was, they don't sing, but they fought and luckily they got back. A couple of them got banged up, but they were there. And that was it. We had 16 million people in the service. Think about that. There's a book called Arsenal America, and it's about how we got ready for World War II. Our people didn't want to go to war. They didn't want to be involved. But Franklin Roosevelt saw the war coming, and he got a guy who was an immigrant, William Knudsen, or Knudsen, depending upon it, and he had come from Scandinavia, came over here when he was a kid, became an engineer, worked his life in Detroit. And he was the president of General Motors. And Roosevelt called him up and said, hey, Bill, I want you to come here and help me get ready for the war. And he put together a war preparedness board, and a little political, and it had problems, and they were fighting all the time among themselves. But Knudsen went out and told the military, hey, we've got the greatest production systems in the world. We need to turn those towards getting ready for the war. And eventually, the chief of staff of the Army went to his chief of staff, of the Army went to Roosevelt and said, hey, this guy is great, but he needs some rank behind him. So he's the only known modern era promoted 3-star general from civilian life, and he handled production. And we manufactured thousands of planes, thousands of ships, millions of guns, all of this stuff. And he converted all of our industries into war production. And we built gazillions of things. And we took 16 million people in. We trained them. We sent them overseas. We fed them. We gave them weapons. Hey, they won.
They came back.
It
Those who
worked.
survived had lots of babies.
Yeah. And Knudsen just went back to Minnesota and Michigan and retired. So I would have retired to a warmer place, but that's his thing. And that's an American hero. People ought to look at him.
Yeah.
And he did it because he was an immigrant. He felt that he owed it to the country.
Yeah.
And I worked with a wonderful guy who's still alive, who was a Harvard graduate, Harvard Law School, and was in the Marine Corps, eventually became a brigadier general. And I said to him, hey, when you get out of Harvard, why did you not go into a law firm? He said, oh, it's simple. He said, Russian heritage. My parents and grandparents were saved from the Russian pogroms by an American nonprofit group. So I felt that I owed the country my service for some time. He said, so I signed up for 20 years, basically. And he said, then I was a colonel and got promoted, brigadier general. But there was a guy who came in to pay a debt to the country. We need more of that. And I know another guy who is a 30-year Army veteran serving in some other activities right now, but he's from the Dominican Republic. And I said, what happened? He said, well, my family moved to New York and I like the military and I really owe them a lot because my kids are going to school. My kids are doing this. And my family has moved here and they got great medical care, which they couldn't have gotten in the Dominican Republic. So there are people like that, and we need to foster that.
Do you think that compulsory service can work? Like Obama had, when he first ran for president, he had a platform where I liked, and obviously would be really hard to pass, but it was everybody has a gap year in between high school and college. They either choose the military, AmeriCorps, or Peace Corps. I always thought it was really interesting because I felt like it would help give people perspective, and you don't have to necessarily go into the military like Israel does. Yet, like, you still have a better sense of service and purpose as you evolve into adulthood. Do you think that, or is it because compulsory, like, it doesn't leave the same effect as these stories that you're sharing?
Well, when I graduated from high school, my mother said to her 2 sons, when you graduate, you either go to college and then to the military, or you go right into the military and then to college. That was pretty strict.
Yeah.
And there are people that do it.
I had friends who were, they were a little bit of trouble when they were teenagers, and judges told them you either go to jail or the military.
Yeah, but that eventually got outlawed.
Yes.
Catlow Russo were the cases that outlawed that. You cannot force a kid to go into the military instead of going
jail.
to jail.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of kids who did get straightened out. A lot of people would say, oh, yeah, well, like I went in and gave me a great opportunity and I did this and this and this. And it came out. Look at Ernest Borgnine. He went in twice and became a movie star, right? Steve McQueen went in. And that used to be it. When I was a kid, Elvis Presley went into the Army. So there was an appreciation for you going into the military. But we've turned the military into a job. It's an all volunteer army.
Yeah.
They can't force you in. You know, there are those people like me who volunteer, and then there are other people who say, no, let somebody else volunteer. And that's one of the issues. I like the idea of people serving in some capacity after high school or college. And it may not be the army, it may not be the military, but there are things that we need to have done in this country that are not being done. And we get some things done, but right now most kids don't leave the area where they grew up, especially poor kids.
Yeah.
So you got to give poor kids a chance to see the rest of the country and be involved with people. It's awfully hard to hate somebody that you sit down and talk with and you live with. In a world like this, if you insulate people that they don't get a full understanding of the rest of the world. That's why I like the military as far as getting people together. You might join the Air Force and you might end up at Atsugi in Japan, where you're with people from Georgia and people from New Mexico and people from Alaska, people from around the country. You might be with Black people. You might be with Indian people. You might be with it used to be the great mixing bowl. And now we're trying to take all the olives out of the salad. And that hurts us. How's that?
I think it's a great way to end our episode. Dan, I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, no.
It's been a great perspective. Love your stories, and I hope that we can talk more soon.
Oh, we will. I had great notes, but I just got going. You wound me up, and I just let everything go.
We'll do
I'll
it.
be happy to do it anytime.
We'll do a second take.
All right, great.
We'll do a second version of our conversation.
Great. You have a great day. I appreciate
Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July, and be safe, okay? Just
All
be
of us
safe.
be safe.
All right. And the kids are the future. It's not us. It's them.